Get ready, 'cause here I come. Gonna move the mountain, gonna touch the sky, stand in the middle of a hurricane, looking right in the eye. Ain't nothing gonna hold me down. Get ready, 'cause here I come.
Glenn Murcutt once said, "I tell my students, you must put into your work first effort, second love, and third suffering. So to all the sufferers, welcome. On behalf of SAIA Practice, welcome to all SAIA members, friends of SAIAshare, and those who have joined us for the first time. This is the first SAIAshare for 2023. It is the 20th since inception 2 years ago. Remember that the presentations of the previous 20 events are available for viewing off the SAIA and ECPD websites. My name is Eugene Barnard, Emil Paulson, and I will be your hosts. Emil is our executive for practice at SAIA. Good afternoon, Emil.
Good afternoon, Eugene. Good afternoon, everybody.
Corina Gibson from ECPD is in the engine room. Am I right, Corina?
Yes, I am.
Great. Angelique Pillay from our kind sponsors, Duravit, is also with us. Welcome again, Angelique. Colleagues, we have two very special presentations this afternoon. Please participate by posting questions, comments in the questions box. In session 2, Philippe Fouchille from SAIAshare will speak on 3 themes in SAIAshare. But first, for session 1, Emil is going to introduce you to Hendrik Pretorius, our first international presenter from the USA. Just take note, it's 4:30 in the morning in San Diego. Emil, over to you.
Thank you kindly, Eugene. Dr. Hendrik Prinsloo holds a PhD in delay analysis. He has more than 25 years of experience in the construction industry as a project manager, lecturer, construction adjudicator, mediator, and expert witness. His latest book, Construction Delay Analysis Simplified, which is published by Amazon in 11 countries, is a popular resource for delay claims worldwide and a prescribed book, one that I'm sure I'm going to be seeing more of and prescribing as well. Hendrik has acted as decision maker on over $3 billion in complex construction projects, including the prestigious Freedom Park developed for Nelson Mandela. He is a past president of the Association of Schools of Construction and has served on various industry committees. Hendrik is currently based in San Diego, California, with his wife, 2 girls, a chocolate Labrador, where he spends his time as expert witness, construction claim consultant, and author. We welcome Dr. Hendrik Prinsloo, and the title of his presentation this afternoon is Construction Delays, Avoidable or Necessary Evil.
Good morning from my side. It's good to be with you, firstly. I've been in San Diego in the USA now almost for 5 years, but I definitely miss South Africa. Before I start, I just want to tell you a quick story. When I started lecturing at the University of Pretoria, one of my first student feedback that I got was from a student saying that she really liked my relaxing and soothing voice. At first, I thought that was a compliment, but later I realized maybe that's why the students are falling asleep during my lectures. So if you have that problem this morning, please ask a question to stay awake. But at least it's only for 20 minutes. Okay, so this morning I'm going to tell you a little bit more about delays, practically how we deal with it, and I'm going to tell you more about the method that I developed that's contained in my books on delay analysis. I'm going to give you some practical examples of delays, and I think from early in my career I experienced many delays on projects, and at some stage I thought it might be my project management skills, so that led me to study further in delays to really see how would be the best way to deal with it. The one project that I was involved in my career was the Freedom Park development. And we were really fortunate when starting out that we had the opportunity to go to many different similar projects all over the world. And the question that I ask as project manager is, how long did the project take? So the answer that we got back is anything from 8 to 14 years. We were really optimistic and we planned to complete the project in 5 years, but ultimately it was only completed in 2010 with the World Cup, so almost 9 years. So several things delayed us along the way. One of the first aspects was that we had an architectural competition, and at first we thought to have only a African competition, but then from the president's office they requested the international competition, and dealing with the UIA they had sort of minimum time frames that's close to a year for architectural competitions. The second delay was when we ended the competition without a clear winner, and we maybe fortunately had to go back to the South African market and appoint a team of South African architects that had a much better idea of the cultural significance and how the project fits into the bigger urban environment. During construction, I think also many interventions from governmental side that cause delays in the development of the main museum building. When we presented the design and we had the opportunity at that stage to present to the president, when we did our cost estimates, we did not have the full extent of funding, and at that stage the president liked the design and he committed and say he would get the additional funding. But as things goes in government, it took so long to confirm the funding that we had to value engineer, reduce the budget, go out on tender, appoint a contractor, because we could not confirm the additional funding. Only later on we got confirmation of the funding. But ultimately that delayed the project. So the question is, how do we deal with such delays when they come up? Now, when I started my research into delay, I really started with the question, what causes delay in construction project? And the other thing that I wondered was, is there any synergy between countries? So I studied delays in 17 or 16 different countries, and there's a list of the countries. And what was interesting about delays is that it's typically divided in three main categories: contractor delay, client delays, and external factors. Now, interesting from a contractor side, and this is typically causes that the contractor takes on the risk. So typically they won't get any extension of time for these delays. So the one that really stood out was site management and supervision, so a major problem. Workforce related issues, and then thirdly, what we see a lot here in maybe because that's the projects that I'm involved in, programming and planning and scheduling related issues. The second category is delays from the client side, and I'm going to give you a few seconds. Can you think of a delay, or what do you think is the most predominant delay from the client side? So let's see if we can test you a little bit and see if your thoughts align with our research. Now, and I think many of you might have guessed this, I think the most predominant cause of delay on the client side is variation orders, and I think we see that in many projects, and that has a impact in terms of cost and also time. Other issues, design quality, incomplete drawings, and I think the maybe a symptom of the fast track construction that we nowadays embark on, long waiting time for approval, funding, and so forth. External factors, and that's typically factors that's beyond the control of the contractor or the client, and you can see the one that's really predominant is the shortage of construction material, and I think we saw that especially during the COVID times. Comparing the countries, United States, change orders during construction, a major cause. The study in South Africa was done looking at 20 years of more public works projects, and the main cause of delay was insufficient construction or contractor production rates. But you'll see it's a wide variety of different causes that ultimately would delay construction. Now, let's talk a little bit about delays. How do we deal with it? And I want to quickly explain some of the key concepts that's critical in delay and delay analysis. This is something that we developed for a jury trial here in the USA, and what is sometimes interesting and maybe fairly risky is that sometimes construction disputes ends up in a jury trial, and you need to convey some of these concepts to a group of people that's not necessarily in terms of construction and what happens in terms of planning and scheduling. Now, typically, I think many of you would know the bar chart like Gantt chart program that you see on the right of your screen. Now, planning is really predicated on the idea of the critical path. The system developed in the 1950s, and it's now, I think, worldwide, the planning system that is being used. And if you look at all your sophisticated scheduling and programming software, it's all based on critical path method of scheduling. Now, you may ask then, but what is the critical path? Now, I like to explain that just using this breakfast analogy. Now, I normally like to prepare breakfast in the morning. I know that it needs to be ready by 8 in the morning, so I normally know from experience that if I start 10 minutes before 8, I should be done by and have my breakfast ready at 8 o'clock. Now, to do the breakfast, I think there's 3 activities that I would do. Firstly, I would fry the eggs, toast some bread, and brew some coffee. Now, if there's a delay to any of that activities, what happens? So if there's a delay to the frying of the eggs, because that is the activity with the longest duration, you will see that immediately my breakfast will no longer be ready at 8 a.m., but it will be later, ready later. So that's a critical delay. Now, on the other hand, if something happens while I'm toasting the bread, I might burn the toast and I need to start over. But because this is a shorter activity, there is a little bit of float of or access time available. So that is a non-critical delay or activity that's not on the critical path. Now, in most construction contracts, if you need to act as the principal agent, and I'm sure many of you would fulfill that role, the JBCC also only allows extension of time for critical delay. So any delay that will impact completion date. So a way to look at if you receive a schedule or program is the float column. So any activity with a float value of 0 or anything below 0 would indicate a critical activity. So if that activity is delayed, it would mean completion is delayed, and that would be a qualifying factor for extension of time. Now, my studies in delay analysis started with this project we did. And I think that's one of the projects that had many delays. So from the start, many different factors impacted progress, like, for example, soil conditions. It's a building that's close to the Union buildings. We excavated a 7-story basement, discovered a lot of groundwater that was really unexpected for that area. Many sort of actions by the client group also caused delays. It was a green building, the government's first Green Star rated office building, and that was also a time-consuming process. But ultimately, we ended up with 176 notifications of delay, culminating in 40 extension of time claims and adding more than 200 days to the construction duration. Now, as project manager, I had the task to evaluate and write reports on all the delays. So my question firstly was, how do I do that? And being busy with a big project like this, I wanted a method that just gave me a few steps that I could follow. I looked at various resources, and being involved in research at the university, did almost a literature review, and I couldn't find any sort of step-by-step analysis approach. So I thought that might be a good idea for a PhD. So this is what I ultimately developed, and using decision trees to really develop a quick and easy method for delay analysis. And that ultimately, I think I included these principles in my book that is available. The South African version is available from the ASAQS. Now, in delay analysis, I think the method gives you 5 easy steps, and I'm going to quickly run through the 5 steps. And it came in quite useful in the projects that I deal with over here. This is a apartment building, a 42-story apartment building in Los Angeles that had a major delay during construction, a concrete accident where concrete spilled down the elevator or the lift shaft and caused a major delay. Now, the typically things that one would look at is contract compliance firstly, so whether the contractor complied with the conditions. So in terms of notification of delay, so that in the JBCC also important, there's a time frame associated for the contractor to submit a notification, and if that's not submitted, there's a possibility that the contractor would forfeit the claim. So that's normally the starting point. So look at, for example, the notification, and did the contractor comply. If the contractor complied with that provisions, we move on to the next step. So whether the delay is excusable. So what do we mean by excusable? So is it a valid delay? So normally excusable delays are defined as delays that's caused by the client or anything that's outside of the control of either the contractor and the client. So the contracts would give you guidance. So secondly, one would typically evaluate delays, and I think that's principles. I think this is a school building in close to San Francisco, and I think the delays that the contractor experienced there, I then basically took compared to the contract to determine whether they're excusable. If it's excusable, and the client or owner's risk, then we would move on to the next step. Now, the next step is whether the delay is critical. So remember our breakfast analogy. So we would ask the question whether this delay is on the critical path or not. If it's on the critical path, indeed, the contractor would comply and qualify for extension of time. The project that I'm showing there is a student accommodation in Orange County in California. I think that project had various delays over a 2-year period that ended up in arbitration, and the key question that we asked in terms of the analysis is the delay on the critical path when doing the analysis. Now, ultimately, if you tick the boxes in step 1, 2, 3, and the delay is critical, it's excusable, the contractor complied, we will look at compensability. This is just, and I think unfortunately we don't have time to go through this in detail, but this is the typical delay analysis methods that you get in industry. And that's more critical path methods, and that's utilized to determine whether a delay is on the critical path or not. So if you're interested in more information, you can go on my website or join me on LinkedIn. I publish articles from time to time. Okay, so once we've determined it's critical, we'll go to the final step to determine whether it's compensable, so whether there's time-related cost payable to the contractor. The JBCC is especially good in guiding on that issue, so the provisions in the contract is structured in such a way that it guides you and tells you whether a specific cause of delay would qualify for compensation. Finally, we will determine compensation, and that is ultimately the 5 easy steps that is included in this analysis method. This has helped me in dealing with projects along the way, dealing with delays, but ultimately maybe just to end off, I think delays that would create problems ultimately, or delays that's not dealt with when they happen. So we see that many times, that if you don't deal with a delay when the delay happens, it might ultimately end up in a dispute. So maybe my last word of advice is, if you have a delay, if you identify a delay, try to resolve it on the spot rather than waiting for a long time. Okay, so let me pause here, so I haven't exceeded the 20 minutes for too long. And I'm going to pause, and if there's any questions, you're more than welcome to ask.
Great, Hendrik. You need not submit a claim for any delay. And I don't know, Hendrik, whether you are able to, or whether you'd like to switch your camera on.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You can join the panel.
Here we go.
Okay, there we are, Hendrik. Thank you very much for that. So let's just say, colleagues, you're welcome. We don't have much time, but you're most welcome. If there are any questions that you would like us to ask Hendrik on your behalf. Emil, is there any thought from your side that you'd like to kick off with before I ask Hendrik my $1 million question?
I do have a question for Hendrik. Thank you, Eugene. Hendrik, when it comes to concurrent delays, things that occur at the same time, you know, for example, it's raining here now in Pretoria. What happens if on the same day there's a delay with delivery of tiles? How does one deal with that?
It's an excellent question, and I think concurrent delays many times lead to disputes. So, I think over the years, many methods developed how to deal with concurrent delays. Now, I think we normally go and look at court rulings for guidance. There's various approaches. The one well-known approach, the Malmason approach, a court case in the UK, would almost more favor the contractor and say, if there's concurrent delays, client delay and contractor delay taking place at the same time, one would not reject the claim of the contractor because of the owner delay. There was subsequent court decisions that really, I think, revised that view to some extent. And I think the The one that is applied in the US and to some extent in the UK as well is more of an apportionment approach, where you would apportion the delay between the parties. But I think that's a fairly complicated thing, and yes, so I would normally in my lectures would spend a few hours on that, but I think yes, that is a critical thing to deal with as it occurs.
Thank you.
Hendrik, just a question that came through from Jaco de Wet, and I'd like to just say thank you for all your comments so far, colleagues. Why not start with step 3? I don't know, we don't have time to go into it, but just your take on that one.
Yes, step 3 is looking at whether the delay is critical on the critical path, and that's a really good question, and that's something that I also grappled with when I developed the decision tree. And I think one reason why I decided not to start with step 3 is because step 3 involves really sometimes a lot of work in terms of analyzing your program. So then you would apply one of the methods like the time impact analysis, the as planned versus as built. That is time consuming, and I normally don't want to start with that if I'm not sure that the delay is excusable or the contract conditions were complied with. So that's why I tend to start with the contract, because you need to read the contract in any case, and then second, look at is it an excusable delay, and then get into whether it's on the critical path, or in other words, will it impact the completion date.
Okay, Hendrik, the next question from Naresh Singh. Is the book available electronically?
It's available electronically. So the I think in South Africa, the South African version is published by the SAIAshare. So you can just go on the website. I think it's under the EduTech resources. It's available both in print and electronically, and that one deals with the JBCC specifically. The more international versions that's available on Amazon deals with some of the other international contracts, but I think the easiest way to get hold of it is through the SAIAshare.
Okay, right. Emil, I'm just looking at all these questions that have come through.
In that light, I see there's quite a few. Hendrik, what is your view on the NEC process of evaluation? That was a question from Gunther Wagner.
Yes, yeah, the NEC is an interesting contract, because I think when they developed the NEC, the thinking was to develop something that's more collaborative, and I think unfortunately many of our contracts would almost put the client against the contractor, more in an adversarial type of environment. The NEC deals with delays, even putting some obligation onto the project manager from the client side to also identify delays. So I like that collaborative approach. And I think it goes back to the whole principle to deal with delays as it occurs. So the NEC also a good project to use, very intense in terms of administration. But yes, I think once you're familiar with it, it's quite a good contract to utilize.
Right. Jivan, thank you for your comment. And Mark Penshard wants to know your view on ownership of float.
Yes, yeah, I think that's also like concurrent delays, one of the big questions, and always contributes to disputes. Now, I think in general terms, I think the principle that's mostly accepted in industry is that the float, now that's the access time on activities, belongs to the project, or almost on a first come first serve basis. So the party that utilizes that float first would normally get to own it in some sense. But yes, I think that's something that's always in dispute, and I think maybe one reason like that contractors would not like to show sort of especially terminal float or float at the end of the project on the programs. But I think that's although many JBCC and most of the contracts would not directly address float, I think there is some industry guidance that would really say it belongs to the project, so whichever party utilizes it first.
Okay. Hendrik, we've actually run out of time to answer the rest of the questions. So colleagues, to Diederik, Jaco, Leon, Anke, I know all of these questions are important, all the way Nadine, Ramir, and Shidesh. I wonder whether if we ask Corina just to capture these questions, and if they can be forwarded to you, maybe just a brief comment from your side. Hendrik, there are not many left, but we just don't have the time to answer them.
Yes, no, I'll do that anytime, and I think, as I say to you, more than welcome to email me if you have a question, or go onto LinkedIn and ask me a question.
Okay.
I think you're more than welcome.
Okay, well, maybe that's the way to go then, colleagues. But I'm sure that you'd like me to thank Hendrik most sincerely. Hendrik, we really do appreciate your participation. And so it's going to now be my privilege to introduce to you our sponsors. And please stay online. They've got some lovely videos that will inspire us just for the next few minutes before we launch into our second special presentation for the afternoon. So Angelique, allow me to give the screen over to Duravet. colleagues, Duravit, Angelique, thank you for those lovely videos. Really pleasure for the eye. It's my privilege to introduce you to Philippe, the principal of one of the principals of SAIAshare. Philippe completed a Bachelor of Architecture with distinction at the University of Pretoria in 2001. He joined SAIAshare in 2008 and has been principal since 2014. Philippe has a strong interest in vernacular design and sustainability and regularly serves as an external examiner for master's design theses. He has a responsive design approach, exploring unique solutions that meet the client's requirements and fit into the context. He has successfully delivered on a wide range of projects, from villas in Europe to mixed use, urban design and corporate projects in West Africa, China, India, and Turkey. He is the recipient of several international awards for projects designed under his lead. Most recently, a resort outside of Dakar, shortlisted for a World Architecture Festival Award. In 2019, his competition winning housing project in Hamburg received a commendation at the World Architecture Festival Awards. Philippe has been invited as a speaker to present SAIAshare's work to audiences in Zurich, Amsterdam, Berlin, Sofia, Stockholm, and various cities in Africa. I'm sure you will all join me in welcoming Philippe. And you know, Philippe, once again, thank you so much for agreeing to participate in SAIAshare. SAIAshare is really what it is. It's one colleague sharing with another colleague, and we thank you most sincerely. Over to you, Philippe.
Thanks very much, Eugene. Can you guys hear me okay? Excellent. So I'm going to switch off my camera. Just Eugene didn't mention that we actually met years and years ago in Petersburg, which is now Polokwane, long time ago. So I'm actually a small town boy and honored to be here. Thank you very, very much for the invitation. Okay. So actually, since I prepared the theme for this talk, kind of changed my mind a little bit about what I want to talk about. So really, just giving you a very brief overview of our company's history. Stefan Anthony started the company in 1986. It's his birthday tomorrow, so quite some time ago. And actually, it was only in the late 1990s that we did our first international project, which was a project in Marbella. And just going through this timeline, you get a sense of how the works evolved over time. Of course, our sister companies were joined at some point, ARC and OCA. And as time went by, we celebrated our 30th birthday, and the work became increasingly international. So at the moment, we are represented in 86 countries worldwide. That's about 193 cities over the 6 continents. And what I always find very difficult with talks like this is to choose the projects, you know, to talk about. So recently, when I was doing a talk, I started organizing our work kind of around themes or threads of thinking. And it helped me a little bit just to organize our work and to look at our work, because I think a lot of the time we're so busy with what we're doing and in the moment that we never stop and analyze what we're up to. So there are kind of 3 threads that I pick up here. The idea of an abstract reference for building form and skin, and then a second idea thread, which is all about bringing nature into our work, and then the third idea, which is really where worlds meet, which is quite an unusual one, but I'll talk about these things very, very quickly, because I've got many slides to go through. So the first project is a project that we did in Lagos, Nigeria, on a very, very prominent road in Lagos. This is Borderline Road in Ikoyi. Greg's team worked on this very closely, and you can see how that kind of cell idea found its way into the shape of the building. And then when looking at how to protect the building from the climate, we introduced this idea of almost like a filigree or screen that protects the building. And the effect is quite effective to cool down the building, but still provides the views through. It's almost like putting on sunglasses. And then quite importantly, the building opens up towards the entrance side to the public. The next project is a similar theme, but a very different looking building. Sorry, I see the slides are going very slowly. This building's skin was really inspired by pattern making and weaving techniques that we find at Dakar, Senegal. So another office building, you can see again in the sketch how the building opens up. And here we explored the use of precast concrete, tinted concrete more specifically. And this was the resultant proposal. Again, similar ideas. The building opens up to the bottom corner to the public, announcing the entrance, and then using precast in different shades to animate the building and to protect the building from the heat. Of course, it's a very dusty environment. They've got the Harmattan, which blows over the Sahara, that brings a lot of dust into the city. And these colors really respond quite well to that. And the building has a better chance of looking cleaner during the process. The next project is a smaller project in Casablanca. Here, the theme is how we brought nature into the experience for the inhabitants of the building. And I'm going to switch to a quick video, if I can. No, excellent. So that's just a little sketch of how the idea developed. Strangely, I couldn't see that video on my side, but no problem.
Thanks.
Sorry, there seems to be a little bit of a delay. So here you can see the resultant plan, indicating how we really opened up this fairly compact site. And Casablanca and actually all over Morocco, there are these wonderful gardens, and we loved the idea of opening up that experience to the garden. And of course, we looked a lot at the modernist work that was done in Morocco, especially in the 50s and 60s, and that certainly inspired our work as well. And looking from the garden back towards the building, you can see how all the living spaces open up to that lovely garden. The next project has a similar theme. Here we're back in Cape Town. It's a residential project. And the building is really on the foothill of Table Mountain. And the challenge was really to bring light and views into the experience. And one must realize that, of course, with these things being so three-dimensional, you really have to open up the roof to enjoy those views. And then the building protects the inhabitants from the noise, which comes from Kloof Neck Road. And you can see the resultant project here. The building has a solid base that also harks back to the idea of grachts, which you see in Cape Town. That's quite prevalent. And that provides a lot of kind of silencing to the noise from the road noise. And then the building opens up like a jewel and allows views upwards towards Table Mountain, really bringing that nature into the experience. So this is the entrance of the building. And then quite unusually with this project, a natural indigenous garden was reinstated on the terrace. So this is kind of the library and bedroom level, one level down from the entertainment level. And this is fascinating because it is this idea that you bring nature back onto a terrace. Most clients would want this all to be hard surface, to be more usable, but this allows for ecosystems to come back into the experience and really for nature to be part of that. The next project takes us to Saint-Tropez, quite a small little project with a very, very similar theme. It's a project where there was absolutely no view, but the building was surrounded by a fantastic pine forest. So the client liked this idea that it's almost like a gallery. And what we did is we folded the roof And that allowed the light to kind of wash into the space, almost like a gallery, but also give you all kinds of views up into this pine forest, which actually gives it this kind of charm. And of course, the folding of the roof also allowed for the structure to work. Otherwise, one would have needed columns in there. The next project is a project in Geneva on the Lake Léman. This was my first project in Europe. Quite a challenging site. As you know, the sun comes from the south, and in Geneva, the sun is everything, daylight's everything. And when I started working on it, of course, we started carving away at this object. I think it's fair to say it's for a very eccentric client who was quite open-minded. And in grappling with the design, we kind of looked at the site photographs again and just noticed this very, very beautiful shape in the Alps across the lake. And that was really the moment of inspiration that led us to the eventual design. So if you imagine the light coming in and this view, that's really how we responded to nature and to what's around us. So very often I think there's a lesson in that for us as architects, just to look around us quite closely. And then as the building roof dips down, that kind of mimics and mirrors the line of the mountain beyond. So you can see the first impression when you walk into the space, the lounge towards the right. And then looking at the building from the front, you can see how that line was picked up in the form of the building. Of course, there were many regulatory aspects that had to be considered that also really dictated some of these roof angles. And then to our delight, this is a very contemporary building, obviously in a fairly old neighborhood in Geneva. It was very well received, and the building has a kind of a politeness in terms of just being softer in that environment, and we actually achieved our approvals within 3 months. The next project has a similar, shall we call it, idea thread. In this case, it's a competition that we'd won working on the Lake of Lucerne. And with this project, we had an incredibly inspiring client who basically said they don't want a house, they want a park, they want to live in a park. And they have this large piece of land, about 37,000 square meters on the Lake of Lucerne. So we won the competition and started working on the project. So that central portion, grey portion, is literally the only portion that one can really see if you look at the site plan. And then there's a surprising amount of program underneath the building. So we allowed the landscape really to spill over the building. And eventually this whole building would be grown over with meadows, natural meadows. And we're working very closely with Peter Odolf, the landscape architect, on this project. So the project's been completed, and unfortunately I'm not allowed to show you any photographs, but this was an under construction photograph taken, I think about 1.5 years ago, where you can see the context of the project. The next project brings us back to Cape Town. So here it's on the other side of the mountain than Kloof Neck. This is on the Kloof Road side, on the Clifton side. And what was fascinating to us about this project when we started working on it was really this idea of how can we reinstate the really forest floor. So many of the buildings on this road really look like small apartment buildings, and we wanted to try and move away from that. And the idea that we actually reinstate the forest bed here, which is basically the second floor up, and break the building up with a garden was a very key idea here in bringing nature into that experience. The base of the building is really grounded and relates to the mountain, and then the building becomes lighter, and in fact those trees have subsequently grown right through those openings. You can see the effect from the inside. You really have this garden experience right on the second floor. And then the building opens up to the view and becomes lighter as you go to the top. Also here you can see how we've opened up the building to the courtyard behind. And the third idea thread is really where worlds meet. This is an interesting one for me. So on the slide now you can see to the left is an old forest, to the right a very industrial area that the city of Stockholm wants to rehabilitate, and we were appointed to look at a hotel here. To the bottom of the image you see a small little village, which is a historic village in Stockholm. And this is really the one world, a world of industry. And then obviously when we visited the site, beautiful forest that you go through actually to reach this place. And then finally the old Swedish architecture, almost a small village next to the site. And the solution that we came up in bringing nature back, we argued that we want the forest really to come back into this environment. And later on, we were also appointed to create a Sunday market underneath this area. Well, we convinced the client to move it underneath, otherwise it becomes quite a cluttered space. And although this is a snow image, one can imagine that the trees on the building and the landscaping obviously talks to that idea of bringing the forest back and allowing the trees to re-inhabit the space. And you can see in this courtyard between the buildings how that could possibly be used one day. But all of that being said, it still has something of that industrial quality that used to be on the site. So this is the atrium of the hotel that actually goes up all 12 stories, and that allows light into the space, and we want to bring trees into that experience as well. So another place where we've looked at this concept was in Dakar, Senegal. This is more specifically Sindia. So to the left, there's a nature reserve. To the right is a residential village, and to the bottom, an agricultural land. And the city's vision for this part of the city is quite futuristic. So they've actually started building some of these buildings. But for us, it was also important to understand the West African vernacular and also look at what was here before and how people inhabited these areas. And when we started developing the project, this is also a hotel resort. You can see in this view how we brought those ideas and worlds together and interpreted in a contemporary way. The site is covered by these beautiful baobabs, so it's almost like a baobab forest, and we managed to save or retain all the baobabs. And this idea of meeting around the baobabs, which is so prevalent and important in African culture, we try to embrace that and make that part of the experience. Carving into the landscape, and similar to the previous project, we're also allowing for the savanna or the landscape to grow over the building. Here you can see the main pool. The idea is really that we bring local artisans to work on some of these elements and using rammed earth for the construction of the building. These are some of the courtyards outside of the food and beverage areas, and then the hotel suites, the spa. And similarly to our project in Switzerland, we're testing this idea of the fluidity of concrete, which is something that came into this project as well on this main axis. The treatment rooms are to the right there. And I forgot to mention, we've got an abundance of water on the site, so we were quite lucky. Underground water was not an issue, although it's quite a dry environment. So when I started looking at these projects and preparing for this presentation, it struck me that there are visual threads that tie these projects together. So there's an idea thread and a visual thread. And it became quite interesting to me to actually explore that. And then looking at our projects, this becomes a challenge. How do you choose the projects that you present? And, so I've identified 5 projects that I want to focus on now for this talk, which in my mind has a visual thread that binds a project. So this was the first project, a small project. It's called Cave Tower. It's in Iceland. It was a competition project that we did virtually, I think, within a week that we participated in. And what's astonishing about the site is this is where 2 continents come together. Well, continental, shall we say, tectonic plates. So when one is on this fissure in the landscape, one is literally between a tectonic plate of North America and a tectonic plate of Eurasia. And that for us was a huge inspiration in designing this building and making that experience really the key experience. So we sliced this object into 2 and then really like in fractal geometries shaped those openings. If you look at the section, it becomes quite clear. It's a fairly small building with very basic functions. But what was important to us in the design was really to slice this building up completely and then take the visitor over this threshold between the two continental plates all the time. And the construction was proposed to be quite simple Icelandic timber construction, and then quite a simple but iconic shape in the landscape. You can see the floors also open up, and when you are in any of these passages or spaces, you kind of connected to that, shall we call it the rift, or where these two plates meet. That has a kind of a tension to it. So that's a fun little project to start off with. The next project is a project in Miami. It's called N-Bay, and it was done by Mark Bullivant and his team with Kieran Robertson. So Miami, quite a unique site. In this case, you can see the double site there combined. And what's important and unusual about this site is that it has access from the water and from the road. And here you can see some more images of that context. And talking about a visual thread, you can see how the building responds to the road entrance. Opens up again this idea of fractal, almost like shards, that announces the main entrance to the building. And then from the water side, a similar language. And you can see that language coming through in the roof planes as well. So just a few diagrams that explain how the building is organized. And you can see these shards that really give form to the space. But what was important to me is that those shards also occur three-dimensionally in the roof shape and the pool shape. So that was an important aspect that also inspired some of our work that followed this, and some more 3D images of that project. So the next project, we mentioned it very briefly earlier, was the Nooilande Quarry. This was a project that we were invited to partake in a competition, which we won. And again, this idea where worlds meet. So to the top left, you've got an industrial area, some agricultural land to the right, and multi-residential areas to the left. And this whole project was sparked by a new railway station that connects you to the city within 20 minutes. So the site's an old industrial site, and next to us is a glue factory. And to the top of us, of our site, there's a rubber factory. And here you get a sense of how what it feels like on the site. Quite a wonderful opportunity here to re-establish the canals and actually bring ecosystems back into these canals and make that part of the experience, and make that part of the experience that the people would have when they're living here. And looking at the history of this area, you can see the very, very predominant use of brick and steel, concrete in this granary towards the right. And the way we interpreted that in our project, okay, sorry, I've lost you there for a second. The way we interpreted that in our project was really firstly to re-establish this wonderful canal and activate it, much like they do in cities like Copenhagen. And then a building that really responds to those finishes. It's got a very strong concrete base, and then the brickwork is prevalent in the building. So we were given a very strict, almost shoebox shape to work within from the urban designers, that we couldn't really move outside. But we did convince them that we can actually challenge some of these ideas and actually bring the public up to the building. We also managed to convince them to change the skin of the building slightly, and they gave us some leeway in shaping and sculpting the skin, almost like a folding piece of paper or origami on the building. That's unusually done in brickwork, in this case in a very dark brickwork. And the insides of the reveals we treated with ceramic, which is very prevalent in Hamburg. quite interesting that they use colored ceramics for ornamentation, and you get a sense of what the building would feel like in winter. Of course, the base of it opens up for cafes and restaurants, and in our case, we also allow the public to actually move up into the courtyards. And the whole inside of the courtyard was lined with colored ceramic, and each building has a different color that helps with orientating oneself. The other thing that we managed to convince the client to do is to connect the buildings on the roof level, which is a fantastic opportunity, which actually allows for the building to share some communal facilities on the roof, and it helps the building just to function much more cleverly in terms of social aspects. So I forgot to mention, this is kind of a medium to low income housing project in Hamburg, and there are hundreds of these kind of mass housing projects happening in Hamburg at the moment because of the huge demand. So there you can see how the courtyards were colored on the inside and landscaped, and on the section you can see how these planes created protected areas for obviously the weather in Hamburg's not fantastic. And the way we animated the roof was really to use the roof space with running tracks, some urban agriculture, and obviously some leisure spaces that people can enjoy and share. So you can see the project kind of in summer, the 2 or 3 sunny days that you do have in Hamburg. The next project takes us to Tokyo, Japan. We were appointed here to look at a site for a client. And when one visits Japan, I mean, I was struck just by how fantastically beautiful the landscape is, but also this very, very strong horizontal lines in the architecture that in a way contrasts with the verticality of the forest and the shapes behind it. We are positioned, our site's positioned in the city, quite dense area. And when we started contemplating the project, we looked at historic images, and you know, the prevalent thing is kind of this very strong roof shape that provides shelter, heat in summer, and very cold and snowy in winter. And we tried to almost take that typical traditional roof shape and reinterpret it in a new way, turning the roof upside down. And similar to the Miami project, we introduced that idea on plan as well as on section. So the next slide just shows the kind of sectional perspective of the building, and one gets a sense of how that allows light into the project, and we brought light right down into the basement of the project. So approaching the building, we use these blades to protect the building from noise and to provide some privacy from this very busy road, but then allowing for an entrance to kind of happen towards the side of it. And from there, one moves down into the building, and what is really quite a heavy, almost Tadao Ando kind of inspired architecture becomes lighter towards the top, and the entertainment spaces where one can appreciate the view and the light. It was obviously quite important to bring light right down into the lower levels of the building. So you can see even near the gym that's at the very bottom enjoys some of that sunlight coming down into the project. You can see how the building fits within that very tight urban environment. And then finally, a project that we've just presented at the World Architecture Festival. It's called The One. It's an apartment building in Dakar, Senegal. So we've been working in Dakar for some time now. It's a fantastically vibrant city that we quite enjoy working in, and our site is situated next to a very, very prominent road, which is also kind of like a promenade where people run and exercise and so on. And when you walk the streets of Dakar, of course, you feel this vibrancy of the city. Here you can see how people are exercising on those beaches. So many people kind of come to this part of the town to enjoy those facilities. And if you spend enough time in Dakar, you'll see people that are engaging with all kinds of traditional handcrafting, very often as a primary source of income. So whether it's timber, rock, or even making sun-dried adobe bricks, that's things that you literally see on the road. But also thinking kind of slightly more philosophically, you can imagine how the Atlantic Ocean is kind of eroded and carved away at this landscape. So this is a basalt rock formation not too far down the coast from our site. And when we started looking at the project, we kicked off with a singular mass representing, shall we say, a typical building envelope. And then inspired by this idea of crafting, we started shaping it really to respond to the multiple forces. So allowing more light in, expressing the entrance very specifically. And then here you can see how the spaces are hollowed out and made much more open to the ocean views, but at the same time much more solid towards the roadside. So I'm going to switch to the video. So this is that idea, almost like a clay model. We started off with a very simple shape and then molded the shape in response to not only the setbacks, but also noise. Of course, we wanted to open up the views, and we created a large hat or overhang for the roof, which obviously shields the building from the sun, which is quite important in this part of the world. And as you come around, you can see how the bottom right corner opens up as a cafe, which really activates the building, in the central area, which obviously is the main entrance. All right, so the resultant building, quite solid towards the road. The next thing that we investigated was the use of materials. So we wanted to source materials close by, and using the land or the ground from the site, from the excavation, and using that to actually construct the walls. So we could use about 64% of the material on site to construct the building in rammed earth, and some of it we're doing adobe bricks. And here one can see the building as you see it from the street view. What we explored with Ramtech was this idea of keeping the outer walls quite crusty and rough, and then on the inside where the opening is sliced open, we actually wanted initially to burn it, to flame it, like that church and that Zoom tour did, but that was not advised. So we're using a very even steel sheet on the inside, and then the outside a much rougher finish to achieve this. So I'm going to jump again to a short video. Yeah, so you can see that effect of the different textures of the rammed earth and really expressing that entrance of the building. This is moving up to the upper level where there's a shared facility, a health facility, and you can see how the building opens up to the views. The corner that we spoke about earlier, where the cafe really opens up to the building and to the road. And the experience of moving through that entrance space kind of backwards to the main entrance. Sorry, I'm realizing that this video is actually out of sequence, but it's okay. One gets the idea. Of course, an entrance canopy that just protects people when they arrive at the building. Right. So just some images that talks about this entrance idea and how it's carved and undulating shape. Again, a visual thread that we pulled through from the Hamburg project. And then finally, how the building sits within its context. This development in front of it is actually a development that we also did for the same client some time ago. And then just indicating how the building is actually responding to the slope on the site. Of course, we wanted to push the building down quite a bit just to keep it visually unobtrusive, but still allowing the views where we could. And then the top level, that's a shared level, and the corner that I mentioned earlier that opens up to the city, which was actually gives you lovely views back towards the city without allowing too much of the noise from the road coming in. I'm going to skip these videos just because time is quite limited. So in conclusion, I think it's fascinating for me as one of the senior architects here to look at our work and try and identify these threads, whether it's an idea thread or a visual thread. And a lot of the success, I think, in some of our projects that we managed to actually find a very strong visual identity to the project, but then also a big idea, you know. So there are many projects out there that, of course, has a great idea and ends up being a building that feels a little bit like a diagram that's just been extruded, but with a great idea. And others actually, you know, have a very, very strong visual identity, but no big idea. And I think moving into the future, what we are exploring is this idea of balancing these ideas and always looking at the context around us to inspire our work, with, of course, within the DNA of our company and our, shall we say, visual identity. So just a huge thank you for everyone, the team that's worked very hard, my fellow principals that I've shown so much work, but I didn't credit everyone. So thank you from all of us, and thank you again for inviting us. If there are any questions, you feel free to ask.
Right, Philippe. I am really speechless, and I'm sure that Emil has the same sensation or emotion. And all I can say is thank you very, very much, Philippe. We unfortunately not going to be able to take any questions, but colleagues, those of you who have enjoyed Philippe's presentation, please post them on the chat box or questions box so that we can pass them on as a compliment to Philippe. You're quite right, Philippe. Our journey started many years ago back in Polokwane, and you know, just to see the extent to which you were prepared to go to make this presentation possible, it's seriously impressive. So, Emil, from your side.
No, thank you, Eugene. I most certainly am going to watch this video again on the SAIA website a few times because the visuals were so beautiful. I'm sure I missed quite a lot. It was really inspiring. Thank you, Philippe. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Okay, right. Okay, colleagues, that brings us then to the end of SAIAshare number 20, and it's been a wonderful highlight. Please, just if you can, stay on just for 5 minutes. I promise you we'll be done before the load shedding starts at 4 o'clock. I just want to, on your behalf again, thank both Hendrik and Philippe for 2 exceptional presentations and for your generous participation in SAIAshare. I want to reiterate, you do not get paid for what you've done. You do it because you care, both of you. You care for the profession and for the industry. Once again, thank you to Duravit for making this free event possible. Angelique, please convey our sincere thanks to your principals. A special word of thanks to all of you who've attended. We've actually had a exceptional attendance today. Over 500 have attended the event, and we thank you sincerely. It's your event. We wouldn't have any reason to do this if you didn't attend it. Remember the category 1 CPD value of 0.1 that the event carries. Each of the events do so. And we invite you now to join us again on the first Friday of March. In fact, we will have two events in March, the first Friday and the last Friday, because the first Friday of April is Easter weekend. So, but the first Friday, please join us. We have 2 very special presentations to share with you again. Leon Pinar is an architect and lecturer at TUT. He will be speaking on definitive computing technology for architecture. Technology is defining the service we render. If you think of the presentations you've just seen, just imagine doing that without technology. Leon is at the cutting edge, and he's going to share with you all about technology in architectural practice. And then we have a very interesting presentation by Dean J. Dean J. Architects recently won the Walgraves Memorial Competition run by the Commonwealth, and he's going to share the ins and outs of the winning scheme with us. We hope to see you then on Friday, the 3rd of March at 2:30 p.m. as usual. Right, colleagues, we have an exit slide for you. Architecture is a wonderful profession. Are we not privileged to design in view of the greatest of all designs? Buckminster Fuller, who you all will remember from university days, said the following: I am deeply impressed with the designer of the universe. I am confident I couldn't have done anywhere near such a good job. And with that thought, I'm going to greet you. Emil, last words from you.
Nothing. Thank you, Eugene, and thank you as always for your hard work on facilitating these events. Thank you.
Right, colleagues, have a lovely weekend. We'll see you again. Bye-bye.